The stars had always been silent, but tonight was different. Somewhere in the darkness of space, a signal emerged, a faint, untraceable frequency that reached the far corners of the galaxy. It wasn't supposed to be there. It was alien, but not in the way the Zorvans, a highly advanced alien race, had ever imagined. For centuries, the Zorvans had observed Earth, believing humanity to be weak and insignificant. They thought they knew everything there was to know about the humans. They were wrong. The signal came from Earth. The Zorvans' most advanced warship, the Dark Veil, drifted silently through the black void. Its sleek, almost invisible exterior was a product of millennia of Zorvan engineering. The ship was powerful, capable of destroying entire civilizations with a single command. But right now, its crew was focused on one thing: that signal. Captain Valora stood in front of the command console, her sharp eyes focused on the strange data that appeared on the screen. Her species was known for its ability to analyze and decipher data faster than any other in the galaxy. Yet this signal, it was different. There was something about it that made her uneasy. It wasn't like the usual transmissions they intercepted from other species. The signal seemed to pulse with energy, almost like it was alive. "Captain, it's coming from Earth," said one of her officers, his voice trembling slightly. Valora's heart skipped a beat. Earth? Why would a species so primitive send out a signal? The Zorvans had monitored humanity for ages. They knew Earth was home to billions of fragile creatures, each one scrambling for survival. The Zorvans had always seen humans as little more than a nuisance, incapable of challenging the might of any galactic empire. But this signal, it didn't make sense. Ilora's eyes narrowed. "Track it. Send a direct response. Let's see if we can establish contact." The officer nodded, tapping the screen to initiate the transmission. But just as the data began flowing, something strange happened. The signal intensified, vibrating the ship's systems with an almost electrical hum. Suddenly, words appeared on the console, in an ancient language the Zorvans had never encountered before. Their translation algorithms scrambled to interpret it. The message was simple, yet chilling. "We know you're out there, and we're ready." Valora's mind raced. The humans had sent this. They knew about the Zorvans. They were prepared for something. But prepared for what? They were nothing more than ants to the Zorvans. Why would they think they could stand up to the might of a galactic empire? She turned to her crew. "What do you make of this?" she asked. The room fell silent for a moment, the crew exchanging uncertain glances. It was clear they were all thinking the same thing. Humans couldn't possibly be a threat. The Zorvans had advanced technology, armies, and the power to destroy entire star systems. Yet here was this strange, mysterious message from Earth, challenging them. It was almost laughable. But as Ilora continued to study the data, a feeling began to creep into her chest, a feeling she couldn't ignore. This wasn't just a random signal. It was a challenge. The humans weren't simply asking for attention. They were declaring something. They had no fear. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. The captain paced back and forth, her mind racing. What had the humans discovered that the Zorvans hadn't? How could a species so young and primitive have knowledge that could challenge a force like the Zorvans? "Captain, we are receiving more data," the officer said, breaking Melora's thoughts. "It appears to be coordinates, a location on Earth." Melora's eyes narrowed as she read the coordinates on the screen. They were pinpointed to an unremarkable place, just a small, uninhabited region of Earth's surface. But why? What could they possibly be hiding there? The Zorvans had long thought that humans, with their primitive technology and chaotic way of life, were easy to manipulate. They had underestimated them. And now, it seemed, the humans were proving them wrong. The Zorvans had underestimated humanity's resilience. The humans didn't know fear the way other species did. They had learned how to survive. They had faced death time and time again. And yet, they kept going. It was something no other species understood, not until they saw it firsthand. Laura gritted her teeth. The Zorvans were not used to being challenged, especially not by a species they had deemed inferior. But something deep in her gut told her this was not going to be an easy conquest. "Prepare the fleet," Laura ordered, her voice cold. "We will answer their call, but we do so on our terms." As the crew scrambled to carry out her commands, Laura stared out into the void of space. She could not shake the feeling that they were about to step into a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans had sent a message, and now the Zorvans were about to find out exactly what it meant. Because if there was one thing the Zorvans didn't understand, it was that humans never give up. No matter how impossible the odds, no matter how hopeless the situation seemed, they kept going. And when the Zorvans would discover why humans never give up, it might be too late for them to turn back. And so, the war began. The Zorvans were no strangers to war. Across the galaxy, their fleets had razed planets, toppled civilizations, and erased species from existence. Their advanced technology, far beyond anything humans had developed, made them an unstoppable force. The very thought of confronting the Zorvans filled most beings with fear, but humans were different. The message had gone out, and it was clear: humans were not afraid. As the dark veil drifted toward Earth, Laura stood before the large viewing window of the command deck. The stars stretched out before her like an endless sea, and yet her thoughts were focused entirely on the small blue planet below. Earth, the home of the humans, the ones who had dared to send a message, one they could not understand, but one they could not ignore. "Captain, we are in orbit," reported the communications officer. "We've received a reply from Earth. They've acknowledged our arrival." Laura's heart skipped a beat. It had only been hours since the signal had been intercepted, yet the humans had already responded. It was clear that this was no ordinary species. What did they want with the Zorvans? "We have decrypted the coordinates they sent. It appears to be a location deep inside a major city," said the officer. Laura glanced at the screen showing the coordinates. The location was within a well-known city, one of the largest on Earth. But the city was surrounded by complex defenses, systems that even the Zorvans had to respect. What could the humans possibly want to show them there? Her eyes narrowed as she made her decision. "Send a ground team. If they are willing to meet us, we'll see for ourselves what they've been hiding. Prepare for landing." The Zorvan soldiers, clad in their black armor, boarded the transport ships that would carry them to the Earth's surface. Their weapons were advanced, capable of cutting through anything in their path. They expected to encounter resistance. That's what they were trained for. To crush, to dominate. They had no idea that what awaited them was not another enemy to defeat, but an invitation into the unknown. The transport ships descended toward Earth, the blue planet growing larger in their windows. As they neared the coordinates, they could see the city below, a sprawling, densely packed hub of humanity. It seemed ordinary, much like any other city they had encountered in their galactic travels. Nothing remarkable, nothing to suggest the great power it might hold. They touched down in the heart of the city, in an open area surrounded by tall buildings. The streets were quiet, eerily so. Not a single human in sight. The Zorvans stepped out of their ships, their boots hitting the ground with a resounding thud. The air was thick with the smell of Earth's atmosphere, something they'd never encountered before. It felt foreign, yet strangely alive. Laura stepped out first, her eyes scanning the empty streets. The city was silent, but she could feel a presence watching them. A tension hung in the air, as if the entire city was holding its breath. "Where are they?" one of her soldiers whispered, his voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. And then it happened. The ground shook beneath their feet. The city, which had appeared dormant moments ago, suddenly came alive. Massive structures began to rise from beneath the streets. Hidden weapons, long concealed, emerged from underground bunkers. The Zorvans' helmets beeped as the city's security systems activated, locking down the area. A system of automated defenses kicked into gear, and within seconds, the Zorvans found themselves surrounded. Ilora's hand instinctively went to the hilt of her energy blade. This was no simple surrender. The humans had known they were coming, and they had prepared for the inevitable confrontation. They had set a trap. "Activate shields," Ilora ordered. The Zorvans raised their shields just in time to deflect a barrage of energy blasts from the hidden turrets. The attack was relentless, and the Zorvans found themselves unable to retaliate quickly enough. The weapons the humans had constructed, though primitive in comparison to the Zorvans' arsenal, were strong and deadly. Each blast struck with precision, hitting the Zorvans where their armor was weakest. The humans had prepared for this. They had known the Zorvans would come. The question now was why. Far above them, in the control room of an old, forgotten structure, humans watched the battle unfold. The leader of the human resistance, a woman known only as Commander Elysia, observed from a distance. She stood silently, watching as the Zorvans struggled against the automated defenses. Her fingers hovered over a large, illuminated button. She hesitated for a moment, her thoughts racing. This was the moment when humanity would prove that they were not as helpless as the Zorvans had believed. This was the moment they would show the galaxy that they were capable of more than survival. The battle was just beginning, and soon the Zorvans would learn something they would never forget about humanity. When backed into a corner, humans didn't just survive. They fought back with everything they had. The first lesson had already been delivered, but there was more to come. As the Zorvans fought their way through the streets of the city, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that she had underestimated her enemies. The humans were relentless, using every advantage they could find. Their weapons were crude, but they were effective. The Zorvans had always been trained to destroy, but humans were trained to fight for survival. And in that moment, Laura realized something. She had never truly understood humanity. The Zorvans had believed they were the rulers of the galaxy, but the humans were teaching her a hard truth. It wasn't about technology. It wasn't about power. It was about will. And the humans had that in abundance. The Zorvans were beginning to realize just how deep the humans' resolve ran. Their advanced technology was failing to break the will of the people they thought were insignificant. For the first time, Elora felt something she hadn't expected: doubt. The humans weren't backing down, not even when faced with superior forces. The battle raged on in the streets of the city. Zorvan soldiers moved swiftly, their heavy armor making them appear nearly invincible. But the humans were everywhere. From high-rise buildings to hidden underground bunkers, they used their surroundings to their advantage. It was a guerrilla war, and the Zorvans were unprepared. Ilora's team had been split up as the battle escalated. Some of her soldiers were trying to push through a heavily fortified sector where automated weapons were mercilessly gunning down anything that moved. Others were stationed in the sky, trying to maintain control of their transport ships and prevent any ground reinforcements from arriving. The situation was chaos. Ilora's eyes were fixed on the battlefield below, but her mind was racing. How is this possible? She muttered to herself. Her communications officer, standing behind her, looked up at the holographic screens showing the city's defenses. "Captain, the systems have locked us out. The humans have full control of their city's security now. They've even started launching their own counterattacks. We're being overwhelmed." Elora clenched her fists. The Zorvans had never faced anything like this before. They prided themselves on their ability to adapt, to quickly crush resistance. But these humans, they were relentless. They weren't like the other species they had subjugated. Back on the streets, the humans weren't just hiding or running. They were fighting with purpose. Commander Elysia was at the front of the counterattack, directing the defense forces from a central command. Her soldiers moved quickly, their tactics designed to outsmart their opponents, using the terrain to create obstacles for the Zorvans' superior strength. The Zorvans had underestimated how prepared humanity was to protect their planet. A small group of humans, led by Captain Noah, a seasoned veteran in the resistance, had managed to breach a Zorvan communication tower, severing their link to the command center above. This was a key victory. Without communication, the Zorvans were unable to coordinate their forces, and their response to the human attacks grew disjointed. "Keep pushing," Captain No barked as he led a strike team through a narrow alleyway. "We need to take out their weapons systems next. If we can cut them off, the Zorvans will be isolated and vulnerable." His team responded with grim determination. They were used to facing overwhelming odds. In fact, they thrived on it. These humans weren't afraid of battle. They had been shaped by war, honed by years of conflict and survival. Every fight, every loss, had only made them stronger. As the team advanced, they encountered a group of Zorvan soldiers attempting to reinforce one of their positions. The humans didn't hesitate. The Zorvans may have been stronger, but they had one critical advantage: the ability to think on their feet, to use their surroundings in unexpected ways. A flash of light exploded in the distance as the humans launched an improvised explosive device into a Zorvan turret. The blast sent shockwaves through the street, knocking the alien soldiers off balance. The humans moved swiftly, taking advantage of the chaos to close in on their targets. Back in space, Ilora watched the scene unfold on her holographic displays. The humans weren't fighting like they were supposed to. They were fighting like survivors. It was becoming clear to her that the Zorvans were not prepared for what the humans had to offer. They had underestimated them, but this battle was far from over. In the depths of her mind, Ilora realized something she had never considered before. The humans weren't just fighting to defend their home. They were fighting for something much deeper, something more intrinsic. They were fighting for their very existence. That was something the Zorvans could not fully understand. The captain stood silent for a moment. "Increase the force field around the city. We need to contain them. They must learn that their resistance is futile." But deep down, Ilora knew it wasn't that simple anymore. The humans were proving something that sent a chill down her spine. They didn't just survive against impossible odds, they thrived. As the Zorvan fleet continued to bombard the city from above, the humans below seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. It was as if the more they were pushed, the more they found within themselves to fight back. The Zorvans had always believed that brute force could conquer any challenge, but they were learning a hard lesson. Humanity was a force of its own. Commander Elijah stood atop the city's tallest building, her eyes scanning the horizon. The war was not over, but a new understanding was beginning to form in her mind. If humanity could hold their ground against the Zorvans, then perhaps they could do something even greater. Perhaps they could show the galaxy that there was a force more powerful than any fleet, more enduring than any army: the human spirit. "This is just the beginning," Elijah whispered to herself. "We won't stop until they understand why they should never have underestimated us." And with that, the humans fought on, undeterred and unyielding, proving time and time again that when their backs were against the wall, they didn't just survive. They adapted, they rose, and they fought back with everything they had. The Zorvans had learned one thing: they had woken a sleeping giant, and now they would have to face the consequences. As the war raged on, something unexpected began to happen. The Zorvans, despite their technological superiority, began to feel the pressure of human resistance more than they anticipated. What began as a calculated military strike had turned into something far more dangerous for the Zorvans: a full-scale rebellion. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were beginning to reclaim their home. Commander Elijah was at the heart of it all, coordinating a series of surprise offensives that had the Zorvans scrambling. Each victory, no matter how small, fueled the determination of the human forces. It was as though they were invincible, and with every move they made, the aliens realized more and more how much they had underestimated their foes. In the midst of the chaos, Elijah received a message from Captain Noah, who had led another strike team deep into enemy lines. The message was brief but powerful. "We've disabled their command center. They're fractured." This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. The Zorvans, despite their strength, had become disjointed, losing the unity and efficiency that had made them so dangerous in the first place. The humans had turned the tide. On the battlefield below, Captain Noah and his team had pulled off a daring maneuver. They had infiltrated a heavily guarded Zorvan stronghold, cutting off vital supplies and communication links. The Zorvans were left with no way to coordinate their efforts, and it became increasingly clear that their invincibility was a myth. As Noah's team moved deeper into enemy territory, they encountered more Zorvans, but each engagement was more difficult for the invaders. The humans knew the terrain like the back of their hands. They used the city's crumbling infrastructure to set traps and ambushes, striking when the Zorvans least expected it. The sense of surprise was on their side now, and it had become the Zorvans' greatest weakness. Noah, his face grim with determination, looked at his team. "We've got one shot at this. We take the power grid down, and their whole operation collapses." The team moved quickly, navigating the ruins of the once beautiful city. As they reached their objective, they planted the explosives with precise accuracy. It wasn't just about destroying the grid. It was about sending a message to the Zorvans. You're not in control anymore. Meanwhile, Elora's anxiety continued to grow. The Zorvans had always prided themselves on being the galaxy's most powerful force, but now they were being humbled. As her fleet hovered above the planet, she could see the steady retreat of her forces, something she never thought possible. They were losing ground, and the human resistance was only getting stronger. She clenched her fists as she watched the explosions from below. The humans had taken out one of their key power sources. That meant they had a chance, a real chance, to win. How could this happen? She muttered under her breath. The Zorvans had every advantage, every piece of technology at their disposal, and yet they were failing against a species they had deemed weak and insignificant. There was no explanation for it. But in her heart, Elora knew something was changing. The humans weren't simply surviving. They were evolving, adapting in ways no one had predicted. Her officers scrambled around her, trying to find any way to stop the momentum of the human attacks. But every time they thought they had regained control, another setback occurred. The humans were relentless. Back on the surface, the humans could feel the shift. They were winning, but they knew the war wasn't over. Every victory brought them closer to reclaiming their planet, but the Zorvans were far from beaten. Elijah gathered her commanders in a secret war room, the walls lined with maps and strategic diagrams. "Now is the time," Elijah said, her voice calm but filled with conviction. "The Zorvans are starting to fracture. Their power is weakening. We need to hit them where it hurts the most, their command structure. If we take out their leadership, the rest will fall." Captain Noah nodded. "We've already taken out their communications. If we can strike their central command, we can end this for good." The plan was set in motion. With the Zorvans' forces scattered and their command center compromised, the humans made their move. They had trained for this moment, when everything depended on precision and timing. They had the element of surprise, and they would use it to their advantage. As the human forces prepared for their final push, the Zorvans were on the defensive, trying desperately to regroup. But it was clear that the human spirit had become a force to be reckoned with. No matter how many battles the Zorvans won, they were no match for the fire that burned within the humans' hearts. In the command center of the Zorvan fleet, Elora's face was grim. She knew that their time was running out. The humans had shown them a level of resilience they hadn't prepared for. She couldn't help but feel a begrudging respect for the very species she had once thought of as weak. She glanced at her officers. "Prepare for the final assault. If we can't win this, we must at least make sure they don't leave this planet alive." The battle was far from over, but one thing had become clear. The Zorvans had awakened a sleeping giant, and they were about to feel its full force. The battle for humanity's future was about to reach its climax. As the Zorvans prepared for their final move, the humans were ready to strike back with everything they had. And the galaxy, once sure of the Zorvans' dominance, was about to learn a powerful lesson. Never underestimate the will to survive. The turning point had arrived. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation as both sides prepared for the decisive clash. On one hand, the Zorvans, once so confident in their ability to crush humanity, were now desperate to cling to their last remaining foothold. On the other, the humans had found something they never thought they would: a fierce, unstoppable drive, a unity forged in the fires of survival. The stakes had never been higher. The galaxy was watching, holding its breath, waiting to see who would emerge victorious. Commander Elijah stood at the front of the human forces, her eyes locked onto the horizon, where the Zorvan fleet hung ominously in the sky. She could feel the weight of the moment. This was no longer just about defending their home. This was about showing the galaxy that humanity would never bow to anyone, not even the most powerful empire the universe had ever known. "We fought to get here," Elijah said, her voice carrying over the comms. "Now we finish this. For every person we've lost, for every sacrifice made, we end this today." The human forces were positioned in key strategic locations around the planet's surface, preparing for the final push. Meanwhile, above them, the Zorvan fleet began to regroup. Valora had given her fleet one final order: crush them. Leave no trace. This ends now. It was the final moment of the war, and both sides knew that there would be no coming back from this. The human forces were scattered, but they were relentless, using every last ounce of their strength to fight back. The Zorvans were spread thin, unable to protect every point of their empire. As the ground forces clashed below, Elijah's squadron took to the skies in their advanced fighters, ready to strike the heart of the Zorvan fleet. Their mission was clear: hit the command center, destroy the leadership, and bring the entire alien war machine to its knees. In space, the battle was fierce. Explosions rippled across the dark expanse as human ships darted between the massive Zorvan dreadnoughts. The humans' small, agile vessels were no match for the Zorvans' technological superiority, but their speed, strategy, and sheer will to survive were forces the aliens had never anticipated. "Stay focused," Captain Noah barked to his crew, his eyes scanning the rapidly changing battlefields on his screens. "We need to get to the flagship, the heart of their fleet. We cripple their command, and the rest will crumble." Noah's team flew through the chaotic battlefield, dodging fire from Zorvan fighters as they made their way toward the flagship, a massive ship that towered over all others. Their target was clear: the control center, where Elora herself had taken refuge. But even as the humans closed in, the Zorvans fought back with everything they had. The flagship fired powerful energy blasts, but the humans used their agility to evade the attacks, making it clear that no amount of force would stop them now. "Hold tight," Noah shouted as they pushed toward their target. A massive explosion erupted from one of the Zorvan ships nearby, shaking their own ship violently. The shockwaves ripped through their systems, but the crew didn't falter. They were used to chaos. They had learned to survive it. The humans' fighters swarmed around the flagship, dodging Zorvan blasts and launching their own missiles in a coordinated effort to breach the heavily armored hull. It was an all-or-nothing mission. If they failed, humanity would face extinction. On the ground, Elijah's forces made their final assault on the Zorvans' last remaining strongholds. Her troops were spread across multiple fronts, but they knew they had to strike fast. As the ground shook beneath them, they breached the Zorvans' last defense, their central bunker, the heart of their operations. Inside the bunker, Elora stood at the command center, her face a mixture of frustration and determination. She could see the tide of the battle shifting. The humans had pushed back every wave, and now they were at her doorstep. "We must hold them off for just a few more minutes." She screamed at her officers, "This is our last stand. If they get inside, it's over." But despite her words, Elora knew in her heart that it was already too late. The humans were relentless, and every inch they gained meant more than just territory. It was a victory for their spirit, their survival. With a massive roar, the last of the Zorvans' defenses crumbled. The humans surged forward, their ranks pushing through the shattered gates. As the final wave of human forces closed in on the command center, Elysia gave the order to advance. "Time to finish this," she said, leading her team through the smoke and debris. "For humanity. For everyone who believed in us." The Zorvans fought fiercely, but they were no match for the human resolve. The battle turned in favor of the humans with every passing second, and the once mighty Zorvan Empire began to collapse before their eyes. Meanwhile, the human fighters above had breached the flagship's hull. Noah and his team made their way toward the command center, their target now in sight. They planted explosives with swift precision, preparing to destroy the ship once and for all. In the final moments of the battle, Elysia stood at the center of the human forces, looking at the remnants of the Zorvan army. She knew this was the turning point that would define humanity's future. The galaxy would never again underestimate the human spirit. They had fought for their survival, and now they were taking their place among the stars. The moment the final explosion rocked the Zorvan flagship, it became clear the humans had done the impossible. They had not only survived, they had conquered. The galaxy had learned an unforgettable lesson. Never underestimate a species that will never give up. Humans had shown their strength, their resilience, and their unyielding will to fight. The Zorvans may have been powerful, but in the end, it was humanity that prevailed. And the universe would never be the same again. As the echoes of the final explosion still reverberated across the battlefield, a strange, almost surreal silence settled over the now defeated Zorvan fleet. Humanity had done what no one expected. They had not only survived, but had also brought down one of the most formidable empires in the galaxy. The Zorvans, once proud and indomitable, were now left to reckon with the consequences of underestimating the human spirit. Elysia stood on the command deck of the flagship, her eyes staring out at the wreckage of the battle. The smoke of the collapsing fleet filled the void of space, and scattered debris drifted slowly through the starry expanse. Her mind, still racing from the fierce battle, struggled to grasp the enormity of their victory. It was not just a military triumph. It was a statement. "We did it," said Lieutenant Harris, his voice filled with awe as he joined Elysia at the observation window. "We actually did it." For a moment, there was no answer. Elysia's gaze remained fixed on the wreckage outside, the remains of what had once been the mightiest force the galaxy had ever known. "Yeah," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "but it's just the beginning." Meanwhile, below in the human colonies, celebrations erupted. The streets were filled with people, all cheering and celebrating the improbable victory. The sound of laughter, music, and shouting filled the air, a stark contrast to the grim reality that had once threatened to wipe them all out. For the first time in what felt like forever, humanity had something to celebrate. Their fight for survival had culminated in triumph. But despite the joy, there was an undercurrent of uncertainty. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of, and as Elysia had realized, this was just the beginning. The victory against the Zorvans would change everything. No longer could they be seen as a fragile, vulnerable species. No longer would they be dismissed as weak. The galaxy had just been introduced to a new era of humanity, a species that would never again kneel. In the aftermath of the battle, Commander Elysia had a meeting with the Council of Nations, a group formed by representatives from the most powerful human colonies. They gathered in a grand hall, their faces filled with a mixture of exhaustion and awe. The consequences of their victory were only just beginning to take shape. "Commander," General Sharp began, his voice gravely serious, "the Zorvans are finished. But now we need to decide what comes next. We have no idea what this means for us, or for the galaxy." Elysia nodded, her face hardening as she took her place at the head of the table. "You're right. This victory doesn't just mean freedom for humanity. It means we've made ourselves a target. The galaxy will never forget what we've done here, and we can't afford to go back to the way things were. We need to prepare for what's coming." "What do you suggest, Commander?" asked Admiral Miller, a sharp, calculating officer who had always been one of Elysia's most trusted allies. "We need to rebuild, yes," Elysia said, "but we also need to ensure our survival. We have to create alliances, strong ones, with other species, with the ones who might respect our strength rather than fear it. We must show that we're not just survivors. We're now a force to be reckoned with." A murmur of agreement passed through the room. The reality of their victory was sinking in, and with it came the heavy weight of responsibility. Humanity could no longer afford to be passive. The Zorvans had learned the hard way that humans did not back down. But this was just one battle in an ongoing war. And who knew what enemies lurked in the shadows, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike? Far across the galaxy, the Zorvans, though defeated, were far from broken. Laura, their once proud leader, had managed to escape the chaos. Though her fleet was decimated and their empire shattered, her mind was already planning the next move. She had learned a valuable lesson from humanity's survival. They were not to be underestimated. Laura stood on the bridge of a small, salvaged ship, staring out at the stars. "The humans have won this round," she muttered to herself. "But the game is far from over. They think they've shown their strength, but they haven't seen ours." The Zorvans were not the only species watching the events unfold. Across the galaxy, many others had taken notice of humanity's newfound power. Some were intrigued, some fearful, and some, like the Zorvans, were plotting their own comeback. Back on Earth, Elysia stood once again on the command deck of the flagship, staring into the stars. The weight of her decision was heavy on her shoulders. She knew that humanity had opened a door to a new age, but she wasn't sure what lay beyond it. The galaxy was no longer a place where humanity could simply survive. It was a place where they would have to fight, evolve, and stand strong against forces they could not yet comprehend. The human species had just proven to the universe that they were not to be taken lightly. And while the victory over the Zorvans was sweet, it was only the beginning. In the distance, Elysia saw the faint outline of a distant planet. This new chapter, full of unknowns, awaited them. It was time to face the future, not just as survivors, but as conquerors of their own destiny. And in the process, humanity would show the galaxy something it had never seen before. A species that refused to give up, a species that would never be defeated. No matter what came next, they would rise to the challenge. As the last remnants of the Zorvan fleet drifted into the void, humanity's victory echoed across the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, a species once thought to be weak and insignificant stood at the precipice of something greater. The war against the Zorvans had shown the universe that humanity was not to be underestimated. Not now, not ever. In the aftermath, Elysia, the commander who had led humanity's forces to victory, found herself standing before the assembled representatives of Earth's most influential colonies. The grand hall was filled with eager faces, all looking to her for guidance, for direction in a galaxy now forever changed. She cleared her throat, the weight of the moment heavy on her shoulders. This was the moment to solidify humanity's place in the stars. No more hiding, no more running. The Zorvans may have been defeated, but many others still lurked in the darkness, waiting for their turn to strike. "We've won, but the war is far from over," Elysia said, her voice steady and commanding. "The Zorvans underestimated us, and they paid the price. But now we must be smarter, stronger. The galaxy will never look at us the same way again, and we must be ready for what comes next." Her words echoed in the minds of the people who had followed her. They had seen the unimaginable, the impossible. They had seen a human fleet defeat the Zorvans, a species that had once been thought invincible. But now, with victory behind them, they had to look ahead. Far from Earth, across the galaxy, other species were already beginning to take notice of humanity's sudden rise. The fear the Zorvans had once instilled in the galaxy was now replaced by curiosity and perhaps a growing sense of dread. What did this mean for the balance of power in the stars? On the other side of the galaxy, the remnants of the Zorvan Empire were in disarray. Laura, their former leader, had vanished into the unknown. But the Zorvans would not fade into obscurity. They were a force to be reckoned with, and though their fleet had been decimated, their thirst for revenge had only grown. Ilora stood in the shadows, her mind working furiously. She knew that this was far from over. The humans had fought bravely, but they had yet to fully understand the galaxy they were stepping into. The Zorvans were down, but not out. Ilora had already begun planning a counterattack, one that would take humanity by surprise. And when the time was right, the Zorvans would rise once more. Back on Earth, Commander Elysia met with her most trusted advisors, discussing the next steps for humanity's future. The victory over the Zorvans was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. They needed to rebuild their forces, strengthen their alliances, and prepare for whatever might come next. The Zorvans were just one enemy, General Sharp said, his tone grim. There are others out there. We need to make sure we're ready. Elysia nodded. I agree. We've made our mark. Now we need to make sure we don't become targets. We need to form alliances with other species, ones that won't see us as a threat, but as an opportunity. We'll show the galaxy that we're not just survivors. We're conquerors, and we'll stand strong against any enemy that dares challenge us. The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. The galaxy was vast, and though humanity had shown its strength, they could not afford to rest on their laurels. They had proven they could fight, but now they had to prove they could endure. The next few months saw humanity rebuilding their fleet, upgrading their technology, and preparing for whatever threats might emerge. Earth's colonies, once isolated and divided, began to work together as never before. Humanity's resolve had been tested, and they had emerged victorious. But their victory had also revealed something far more important: their unity. Commander Elysia had become a symbol of hope, not just for Earth, but for all of humanity, and her leadership would guide them through the uncertain times ahead. As humanity's presence in the galaxy grew, so did their reputation. The once fragile species that had been on the brink of extinction had now become a force to be reckoned with. Their fleet was stronger than ever, their technology more advanced, and their resolve unbreakable. But there was still one question that lingered in the minds of everyone. What would they do next? As the sun set over Earth, Elysia stood on the observation deck of the flagship, gazing out at the stars. The battle against the Zorvans was over, but the war for the galaxy was just beginning. She knew that the galaxy was a dangerous place, and there were many challenges ahead. But humanity had proven something important. They could survive, and they could thrive. The universe would never be the same again. The humans had shown their strength, their will to survive, and now they would make sure everyone knew. Humanity was here to stay. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: no one could ever underestimate humanity again. They had survived the impossible, and now they would carve out their place among the stars. And with that, a new era for humanity had begun.